Hello, everyone, and welcome. Very, very much, and a very, very warm welcome to tonight's webinar, which is called Climate Action and the Need for Transformation. It's the fourth webinar in a series of monthly events, and it's organized by the Center for Applied Buddhism. And we're holding these monthly events together with the Buddhist organization SGI UK, leading up to COP26, which is the company of the parties in Glasgow in November this year. My name is Olivia Fuchs, and I'm a fellow of the Center for Applied Buddhism, a long-standing member of SGI UK, and I'm involved in advocating for climate action amongst the religions as part of the Faith for the Climate Steering Group and as a member of the COP Faith Task Group and as the coordinator of the Eco-Dharma Network. Sorry, that's all a bit of a mouthful, but just to sort of see how everything's interconnected. A couple of things before we begin. If you wish to read what is being said, you can follow on a link that will have been sent to you. And again, we can just type it maybe back into the chat box. We have a palantypist who's going to be using clear text to type what's being said. Today's event is a multi-faith panel discussion with 5 wonderful speakers from different faith traditions who will each speak for 10 minutes, followed by a question and answer session. So please do put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens as they occur to you. We will try and answer as many as possible. To give some context, 2021 is a crucial year for climate action, with international negotiations at COP being an important opportunity to keep the world below 1.5 degree warming. Building on the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, COP is the largest international climate conference, which provides us with an opportunity to hold our governments to account, putting pressure on them to invest in a fairer, just and sustainable future for all. We as faith groups have a powerful responsibility to take action on climate, because the climate crisis is an existential threat affecting all of humanity and life on Earth at the deepest level. Similar to the COVID pandemic, it highlights inequalities and injustices, hitting poorer and disadvantaged communities hardest. As people of faith, we must try and find the moral courage to confront these injustices, to advocate for climate justice, and to grapple with the profound questions of how we can transform ourselves and our society. This multi-faith webinar, entitled Climate Action and the Need for Transformation, hopes to contribute to the dialogue around these questions. The title has been inspired by the second main strand of the COP Faith Task Group's work, the first one being advocacy, which is a topic we will discuss more fully another time. So why transformation? What do we mean by it? As faith communities, we recognize the transformative potential of human beings, individually and collectively, and we realize the importance of inner and outer transformation needed for us to mitigate and to respond to the climate crisis. The COP Faith Task Group identified and is prioritizing 3 areas: action, collaboration, and education. Education and action is really about encouraging behavioral and lifestyle changes individually and collectively, and putting our own house in order as faith communities. And collaboration is also how can we co-create the future? How can we work together as religions from different faith backgrounds? And that is the focus for our discussion today. As faith communities, we believe in the inherent creativity and potential of human beings to collaborate and find new solutions to the problems facing us. And over time, we've evolved already strong and resilient communities that are used to supporting and caring for each other and the vulnerable. We understand resilience as not only being the capacity to prepare for and respond to external stress and threats due to the climate and ecological crisis, but as the ability to realize a hopeful future rooted in people's natural desire to work together towards common goals. It's now my great privilege to introduce our 5 inspiring panelists who are all connected in one way or another through Faith for the Climate, and most of them through its capacity building group, which is generously supported by Religions for Peace UK. Talia Chain is a trustee for Faith of the Climate and the CEO of Sade Farm, a UK-based Jewish farm and environmental retreat centre. Amandeep Kaur Maan is the lead for EcoSeek UK, having had a career in environmental and management. Kamran Shehzad is the sustainability lead for the Bahu Trust and the climate change advisor to the Mosques and Imams National Advisory Board in the UK. Davina Chauhan is a youth outreach coordinator at Hindu Climate Action and a recent economics and politics graduate. And Jamie Cresswell is the director of the Centre for Applied Buddhism and works in many intra-Buddhist and multi-faith environments. So I'm going to now hand over to Talia Chain, who unfortunately is not terribly well tonight. So she won't be able to stay with us till the Q&A, but thank you so much, Talia, for being here to talk to us tonight. Thanks.
Thanks for having me. So today's a big day to give a climate talk because it marks the end of Tu B'Shvat, which is the Jewish festival of the birthday of the trees. Trees are very important in Judaism. Our most holy scripture, called the Torah, is referred to as the tree of life. One of the important Jewish ecological ethics on prohibiting unnecessary waste, which is called Bal Tashchet, and Sadeh, our Jewish farm, talks a lot about, comes from this idea of not destroying fruit trees in times of war. You know, they weren't so worried about destroying cities, but the fruit trees you couldn't destroy. The birthday of the trees, which is such a nice idea in and of itself, called Tu B'Shvat, it was very significant in ancient times, in biblical times, because it was very important for ancient people to know how old the trees were due to a tax law, which meant that you weren't allowed to pick the fruit trees, basically, for the first 4 years of the fruit tree's life. The law itself was called Ola, which means kind of a cutting, and you weren't allowed to take the fruit from the trees for the first 4 years. I find this to be really incredible because this law was in a time where famine was regular. You know, it happened every so often. It's always spoken about in the Bible. There was constant famines. We know in ancient times there was lots of famines. There's still famines today, increasingly more so. And yet they're looking at fruit basically withering away on a tree at a time when they could have been picking it and storing it to feed their families in lean times. So you've got to ask yourself, you know, why were they doing this? And I think ancient Judaism, there's this really incredible combination of spirituality and agriculture. The whole of the Jewish religion is really agriculturally based. We have many concepts of property law, of ownership, of everything from when you do your daily tasks to what you can eat. And they're all really agriculturally based. Who owns whose farm, whose cattle who is responsible for whose cattle if it wanders off into someone else's field. Everything is really based on these agricultural concepts because in ancient times, everybody lived agricultural lives. And nowhere is this shown more than in this concept of Ola, of not eating fruit from the trees. And that's because we can combine these two things, religion and agriculture. We can say to ourselves, perhaps a reason for Ola is that in ancient times, people knew if you left fruit on the trees, so the birds would come and eat the fruit, and the ground around the fruit trees would be fertilized. Or you wouldn't take every piece of apple from the fruit and you'd let it go drop to the floor and the fruit would rot and fertilize the tree. There are good agricultural concepts for leaving fruit on the trees and its infancy stages. And at the same time, this more spiritual concept that actually we don't take everything that's given to us. We don't mine from the land, we share. The fruit trees belong to the divinity from which it came. It was a combination of a farmer and the divine hand, which means that there's rain, which means that there's sun, which means that we have a beautiful universe to live in. We can combine those two things. And Tu B'Shvat is every year we mark the year of the fruit tree. Is it today? Do we eat from it today, or do we let it nourish the ground, nourish our spiritual home, nourish our divine planet? If I think about if I think about this in the concept of transformation, we need to remember this. Like, as a Jewish people, have we moved away from that? Yes, we have. We swapped our scythes for our law books, I always say. But it's time to remember, like, what is the root of our traditions? What is the root of our laws? And it's this concept of agriculture mixed with spirituality. And I think, if I'm thinking about how Judaism can transform to be the force for good in terms of looking at our planet and caring about our planet, we need to go back and remember these really important tenets of our faith. And that's a lot of what we do at Sadeh, at the Jewish farm. And there's definitely been a trend towards that, which is really amazing, with Eco Synagogue being always supported by the Work for Faith for Climate, which is excellent. At Sadeh, talking about actual practice in this time, we planted 150 trees last week. And over the last 3 years, we've planted 830 trees, and we only have about 5 acres of land. So we plant a lot of trees. Yeah, so Tu B'Shvat is a great time to be talking about this. There's talks up and down the country at the moment about how Jews can get involved, which is just really important, because I think it's been not a priority. Like everyone else, it's been not a priority. Does the Jewish community know a lot about COP26? I don't know, but we're going to get there. And then thinking about co-collaboration, co-creation with all these different faiths and spiritual traditions, and how this all works together. There's a quote from our scriptures. Upon creating the first human beings, God guided them around the Garden of Eden and said, "Look at my creations. See how beautiful and perfect they are. I created everything for you. Make sure you do not ruin or destroy my world, for if you do, there will be no one after you to fix it." And I just think, what a call. And this kind of call to arms, like, this is a divine planet, how are you destroying it, is seen in so many religions. Whenever I talk to people of other faiths, they're always bringing out their own scriptures saying, yeah, we have the same kind of thing. Why are we not heeding it? I think religions are in a really perfect, and spiritual traditions are in really perfect position to think about the next generation in a way that governments just aren't. You know, governments, they come and go, they're elected, which is a great thing, but they think in very short-term reactionary stints, as we've seen with COVID, right? Like, a government has to respond to a crisis. They never plan ahead and think beyond the next term. Whereas religion is about passing on traditions, whether they're good or bad. Like, this can be a highly problematic thing, at least in Judaism, but at least it's a central part. We think about, what are we passing down to our children? What are we passing down to our children's children? What are we passing down to our children's 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 children? It's a huge part of at least the Jewish faith, and I think many faiths. And there's this lovely story that is commonly told in Judaism, about this special kind of wise mystic person called Choni. And Choni was walking on the road one day and saw a man planting a carob tree. And Choni asks the man, "How long will it take for this tree to bear fruit?" And the man replies, 70 years. And Choni asks the man, "And do you think you will live another 70 years and eat the fruit of this tree?" And the man answers, "Perhaps not. However, when I was born into this world, I found many carob trees planted by my father and my grandfather, or grandmother probably. Just as they planted trees for me, I am planting trees for my children and grandchildren, so they will be able to eat the fruit of these trees." And I just think that says it all. You know, the story, how do we co-create the future? What is the story? The story is this: like, we have inherited a beautiful divine world, which together between the divinity and humankind, we have created something amazing. And we need to think, how are we passing it on? Who are we passing it on to? Is there going to be a world for our children's children's children to grow up in? Surely that needs to be at the center of everything we do as religious people, as spiritual people. Surely it's about protecting it forever and forevermore. And that is what I have to say. Happy Tu B'Shvat.
Wonderful. Thank you, Talia. Beautiful, beautiful. I can't pronounce it, but happy one to you too. Such a wonderful way to start our talks as well. So thank you so much also for the lovely story. So thank you, Talia. And I'm now going to hand over to Amandeep Kaur, who is the lead for EcoSeek UK and also a founder member of the capacity building group for Faith for the Climate. And we've known each other for quite a while, and it's lovely to welcome you as well, Amandeep. Thank you.
Many thanks, Olivia. Thank you very much, everyone, for organising and inviting me to this as part of EcoSeek. Really happy to be here today. Talia, that was so enlightening. I learned so much from that talk. My name is Amandeep Kaur. I'm from EcoSeek UK. We're part of EcoSeek Global, which originated in Washington, but is also teams are in India, Canada, and some other countries doing a lot of fantastic work. We are part of Faith for the Climate, which I cannot speak highly enough about because we've learned so much through the capacity building project. And multi-faith events like this are so important to us because it's a way forward that isn't often explored. We're not often going to meet people from different faiths in our everyday lives. So this is great. If we can have the first slide, please, I'll talk a little bit about what EcoSeek do. So it's a unified integrated response to help combat climate change, global warming, and biodiversity loss, which is a lot of words, but really how we're going to achieve it is going to be through facilitating partnerships, collaborations between not only individuals, but also organizations. We want to kind of build a bridge between knowledge and people who maybe aren't so sure and think environmental issues aren't for them. The aim is to make, everyone from the Sikh faith feel like an EcoSeek. It's not just something for an academic or a scientist to do. And we need to kind of break that stereotype about what kind of people do environmental work and voluntary or even just discussions, taking part in discussions. So the Guru Granth Sahib Ji is our holy scripture, and from that there's a line which is in front of you there, and it's about nature essentially, and how air is our guru, water is our father, earth is our mother, and really the oneness that Guru Nanak Dev Ji, our first guru, talked about is within everything, from people to creatures to nature. And that oneness is what we always take forward when we talk about kind of Sikh teachings. And Sikhs are, as part of the Khalsa, made to stand out from a crowd. So baptized Sikhs, you will see them from afar with the 5Ks and their appearance. And the whole point of kind of the Sikh Khalsa was to stand up for what's right, protect the vulnerable. And right now, what is more vulnerable than our planet and the damage that's being done to it? And if I can have the next slide, please. So just talking about Guru Nanak Dev Ji there, our first Sikh guru was all about sustainability, simple living, earning an honest living, not pursuing greed. Our seventh guru, there were 10 in total, our seventh guru, Guru Har Rai Ji, he had a particular appreciation of all the gurus to appreciate the medicinal qualities of herbs and plants, of animals as well, and he had many animal sanctuaries. So 14th of March is the day that our seventh guru obtained the guruship and became guru. So that is the day that EcoSeek has got as World Sikh Environment Day. And each year it's celebrated up and down the country and across the world, whoever knows about it, in just talking about in Gurdwara, in our places of worship, what we should be doing, how we should be living, if we're really following the Guru's teachings. We're also encouraging people to make pledges about what they will change, kind of like a New Year's resolution, but climate specific. And also litter picks, organizing something that's easy to do for the whole family. So that's where World Sikh Environment Day, March 14th, kind of comes from, and it was started by EcoSeek a few years ago. If I can have I'll just say a quick quote. So Guru Har Rai Ji, a really nice quote from him is, "Man breaks flowers with one hand and offers them with the other. but the flowers perfume both hands. There are axes that cut the sandal tree, yet the sandal perfumes the axe. And I think that's just really beautiful to demonstrate how nature is, it's unconditional love from God that we have during lockdown, during COVID. So it's really helped people and supported people in getting them out of just that mindset of there is no one. Nature is always there for us. The outside is always open. If I can have the next slide, please. So in the UK, a lot of Punjabi Sikhs are kind of descendants of the Punjab. Punjabi Sikhs implies that anyway, but they feel a very, very kind of close connection to things that are going on in Punjab. And often social injustice and political things aren't always linked to environmental issues. So at EcoSeek UK, especially, we're very keen on talking about how social injustices are impacted by what's going on in nature. So some of you may not be aware, but in the last couple of months, there's been a lot of protests going on. And the Punjabi farmers are saying that the government's kind of farmers bill has been done without consultation, and it's not fair. Some of the things in it, it's a lot of detail to go into, but if anybody would like to have a look at it, please do. And this goes back to the agricultural history of Punjab. The water kind of depletion, the groundwater depletion is severe, and the farming methods just aren't that sustainable anymore. So for people in the UK who want to do something for this and feel that kind of familial connection, we are trying to find kind of well-researched, informed opinions and academic papers on actually how did this start, the Green Revolution of the 70s. It goes back a long way, and we want to provide that voice to kind of give more background where people might not have the access. And the resources out there now are just so intense. There's so much that you can find on the internet. What we want to do is help people access information that's helpful and accurate. If I can have the next slide, please. So this is a really good post that I saw, was widely shared, and I think for a multi-faith webinar like this, it's so appropriate. It's not, oh, where's it gone? That image was about, oh, I lost. Yeah, this image is showing people of different faiths in India praying for the same common goal, that the multinationals and the governments don't get their way, and these farmers get to keep their way of life. So I thought that was really powerful. If I can have the next slide, please. So EcoSeek have got this aim that when it was Guru Nanak Dev Ji's birthday in 2019, 550th, they thought we should celebrate by planting trees. And if we can do this, it would be 1 million trees around the world at 1,820 locations. So we are encouraging people to sponsor trees, because it's not just about planting them, it's also about the care for them afterwards as well. If I can have the next slide, please. So these are examples of some of the events that we have. Just making sure everybody can hear me. These are events that we've held in the UK, and we are planning on holding a lot more, because we find that sometimes where a Sikh Gurdwara is in any kind of UK city, they might not have had much dialogue with a church down the road, or any other place of worship down the road for them, or in the same kind of region or area. So we want to bring people together with a common goal of nature. We had Eco Diwali, and we are anti-fireworks. We think that it's just crazy how it's all of a sudden turned into such a kind of pollution-filled night, when the feelings behind it and the stories behind it are very, very peaceful and kind of joyous in a way that we've kind of forgotten. So we're trying to say no to fireworks. We want to make areas that maybe aren't that well accessed by people of the Sikh community or the beiung communities, such as canals and rivers. They're not just things that people of certain backgrounds do. if you live near one, you should be accessing it and using the towpaths to, do cycling and kayaking on the river. So we want to hold those kind of events to bring those communities in to those kind of places. There was a report recently that said, people from kind of beiung backgrounds don't access green spaces as much, and that's quite concerning for us, because we think Gurdwara, any kind of Sikh community group, they should be promoting their local green spaces. They should have notice boards kind of displaying events like this that are going on, or just green spaces in general that people might not be aware of. So that was some example. The next one, please. In Derby, there was a massive event a couple of years ago where 5,000 trees were planted, and this was done through collaborations with Woodland Trust. And we found that collaborating with kind of well-established organisations has worked really well for us. The prayer that was said at the beginning is a traditional Sikh, it's called an ardas. And as you can see from the picture there, it was a proper family event, women, children of all ages that were involved in this. So we're really proud of this event. We want to hold a lot more like this. Can I have the next? There's no slides after that. So you back to me. Yeah, so the events that we want to hold every year would be kind of national campaigns as well. So where there's a Keep Britain Tidy campaign, we would love for the Sikh communities in their respective areas to do kind of litter picks and encourage more multi-faith events like that going on. After COVID, we can do kind of more stuff together. Regional networks are our big concern at the moment, because we need those. We need volunteers, so our recruitment drive is underway, and we would like people to volunteer if they have an interest in this. And EcoSeek UK really want to be a platform for people who have a passion and can support them with resources. We want to apply for funding to carry out more projects. We have got already some interest, where we've had some people contact us and say, near us at our Gurdwara, there's a piece of land that we would love to form into kind of contemplation garden, so that when people come to the Gurdwara, they've got this quiet space, rather than, and if anyone's been, it traditionally gets turned into a car park. And it's really nice to see that there is a demand for it, especially younger people now going to the Gurdwara. They want that tranquility, that feeling that people, I think over time the buildings have kind of lost that. A monthly newsletter has started, and that's what we want to use to celebrate all those people that are doing some fantastic work, like whether it be growing your own veg, or even like something really simple to something really difficult. We want to showcase it all, and our newsletters feel like a good way to do that. University Sikh societies have also been approached, because we are quite keen on youth engagement. And again, it's not about, there is no age limit or age requirement on who can be interested in environmental matters. It's not something for the academics or scientists only. We want to get young mothers who want to do stuff with their children that's nature-based. We want to support them with resources. And Surfers Against Sewage is something that came up recently. One of our co-founders was very keen on getting Sikhs more on the beaches and doing the litter picks there. So we want to look at all kind of aspects of UK life and truly make it UK. It's not just the main cities that are usually Birmingham or London or anywhere like that. It's about accessing the whole of the UK, making them feel part of this. So for the future, we want to do a lot more practical tips, because that's what works best. And it's not all about tree planting. It's also about ethical consumerism, questioning things that you think you might have a better alternative out there somewhere. Managing household waste, simple things like in a household, batteries, electrical waste. Are people really disposing them as they should be? And it's not about pointing the finger. We just want to support people in kind of finding out ways on how to disseminate that information, supporting local authorities, supporting water companies on getting that information out to the communities. Careers are a really big thing for us. We feel that environmental careers, people are not always linking that with faith. So if you're a person of faith and you really feel like you want to do something meaningful, a career in environmental management or there's a whole range of things that you could do. And what we want to do is kind of get those professionals to write testimonials about their career paths and maybe support people coming up in this field. We want to do green guides for Gurdwara. So the buildings form such a big part, you know, of our carbon output in the UK. Buildings account for a lot of that. And it's like, what can we do with retrofitting and supporting procurement strategies and just little things that they could do to be more environmentally.
Amandeep, is it all right if I stop you there, because there's so many things you're doing, which is amazing. Is that all right?
Of course, I didn't keep track of the time. I'm sorry, but I'm done now anyway. Thank you so much.
Don't worry. Thank you so much. That's really brilliant, Amandeep. Thank you. And I'd like to now hand over to Kamran Shehzad, who's also very much involved with Faith for the Climate. He's also been supporting and is part of the capacity building program or group. He's the sustainability lead for the Bahu Trust and a climate change advisor to the Mosques and Imams National Advisory Board, UK. So thank you, Kamran.
Thank you, Olivia. Can I have the first slide up, please? Okay, my name's Kamran Shehzad. I'm based in Birmingham. I work for the Bahu Trust, and one of my jobs there is to promote climate-friendly worship and living and sustainability. And that's over a number of years now. It's not easy, but we're getting there. And I'm not going to talk so much today about what Islam says about the environment, but more focus on the actions that we're doing around transformation. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so one of the very early things that we started to do at the Bahu Trust was develop a workshop to train imams and community leaders, because faith leaders are always on the front line and they're always in a unique position to influence their congregation. And this workshop was done in a very kind of empowering way, because the last thing imams need from Kamran here is to tell them about their religion and tell them about what the Quran teaches. And so it was done in a way where you just kind of plant a seed and then they start teaching each other. And then that workshop kind of led to them coming out with ideas and discussing all the issues within our community. Next slide, please. And this led to the imams. I mean, this was our first workshop. We've done many since, but we quickly found at the end of that workshop, these imams started making their own pledges. Okay, so now after spending a day here, we've learned from what the Quran says. We've learned about actions. We've learned about issues in our community. What is it we can do? So some of our imams, you can see on the screen, said they will motivate other imams. Some have said they will implement a walk to the masjid scheme. Others said they will talk about this more on their Friday prayers, reaching out to thousands more potentially. Next slide, please. And eventually, over years, that's led to us creating more and more resources. We've created our green guides. We've created sustainable living guides. What's a Muslim's guide to climate change? A Muslim's guide to energy and climate change, transport and climate change, food and climate change. And the reason why is we focus on these because within the religion of Islam, there are specific teachings, and we're using those teachings as value-based teachings. So it's not necessarily all about the science behind it, but getting us to use those narratives and the Quranic verses and the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. You know, we've created video resources, etc. So much, and we're constantly adding more to our resources now as we go. Next slide, please. We've also started raising awareness of the use of plastic. Plastics everywhere. It's hard to get rid of plastic, especially if you're a place that has thousands of people visit your mosque. You know, if it's just a small place, then it's very easy to use reusables. But when you have something on a large scale, it's not always necessarily easy. So we started off doing a plastic-free iftar which is opening a fast in the month of Ramadan. So can we go to the next slide? And initially we started with 3 years ago, we started with just one fast in the whole month of Ramadan, 30 days. And we did, I think we have approximately 400 people who come to open their fast in the mosque. And so we did the first one with the reusable, not reusables, biodegradables. And it was quite successful. And then the following year, we did 10 days in Ramadan. And in the third year, we did the entire Ramadan without using any plastics. And then after that Ramadan, we have, I would say, our policy says we don't use plastics, but like I said, it's always easy to go to the shop and buy 100 plastic cups for £1 than it is to buy biodegradable ones. But now we're working on doing reusable ones. But again, that's not easy, because you need volunteers constantly to wash everything up, and then volunteers. We live in a very busy world at the moment. If I go to the next slide, please. And you can see here the potential for people to see how many people we can reach out to. This was one of the Ramadans where people come to open their fast. And on the left-hand side, you can see the Imam in the white beard and the white turban. Just a quick story about him. Initially, when I spoke to him about plastics, he wasn't overly interested, and I gave him a speech to read, and he said, look, I don't really fancy doing this. I enjoy my Volvic water. It's better than tap water. I'm not gonna. And so we came to an understanding that, hey, look, just please do the speech, whether you like it or not. You are the Imam, you are. So I scripted his speech for him. But when it came to opening his fast, he didn't do the speech at all. In fact, he brought with him a metal reusable bottle and a metal tiffin box with his iftar pack to open his fast. And instead, he spoke about to all the congregation who was there. He spoke about his own journey and his conversation with me, and him having read everything that was written for him and the Quranic verses, and how it embarrassed him, and he changed his stance. But his story was probably, and his personal journey was more important to the congregation than the actual speech. So people in power are quite influential. Next slide, please. We do regular monthly cleanups. In Islam, there's a very popular saying that cleanliness is one half of your faith. So every month we bring our community out to get them to clean everything around them. We get men, women, children, the imams. So we do this quite often, and it helps us instill a sense of responsibility and ownership. Next slide, please. And the next one after that. The Bahu Trust, we have 22 mosques around the country. 18 of our mosques have now installed solar panels so that we have clean green energy. Next slide. We work in Birmingham, we work very closely with Footsteps. It's a lovely project, very genuine, unique people. They set up just around the time of the Paris Agreement. We worked with them very closely to develop the Small Footsteps project, was to bring children from different faiths together for us all to learn about different aspects of of our living, water, energy, trees, ecology, recycling, climate change. And it was a really beautiful way to bring everyone together, and for all the children to understand that even though they have different faiths and religion, they all have the same care and duty towards the planet. And what I will do after I've finished, I will post a little video link, which is worth watching after this webinar finishes. I guarantee you'll really enjoy it. Next, next, and the one after that. And if you want to know more about the Bahu Trust, you can go to our website, bahutrust.org/environment, and you can get more on what we do, and also you can download some resources. Can we bring down the slides, please? So that was just the actions, the physical actions. But moving on from that now, our main transformation needs to be spiritual. We can organize as many events and activities as we want, but they're not going to be genuine, and they won't really work if they're not tied into our faith values, and they won't last very long, and they'll only be token gestures. You know, and Talia mentioned earlier, she mentioned faith groups are very strong, they're very powerful, they have the ability to bring about change, and that's so true. 85% of the population of planet Earth is identifies with some form of faith or another. But unfortunately, I have to say I'm battling with that statistic, and the reason I'm battling with it is if 85% of the population identifies with that faith, then why is the Earth in the crisis that it is? And I don't think that our practices are in line with our faith values. And that's why there has to be a massive spiritual transformation. We have to reevaluate our faith, and we have to start looking at it the way it was when our faiths were formed. I mean, there's no such thing as environmentalism. Environmentalism is a new word. 100 years ago, there's no such thing as environmentalism. Everyone lived as part of the earth. You know, so we need to look at how we do that. And I'll give you an example. Now we're offenders. We're offenders of the earth. We've offended. We've plundered the planet. And if we're to change this, the first thing we need to do is look at where do we stand from a faith perspective. You know, we need to accept that we've messed up, you know, as people of faith. Yeah, I'm not talking about you individually. I'm talking very generically here. So I'll give you an example of a criminal. Now, if that person's to be rehabilitated, you know, and be good in society, you know, they need to make amends. The first thing they need to do is be sorry for what they've done. And as a Muslim, you can't just say sorry. You can't just ask God for forgiveness. You know, in the religion of Islam, there are certain criteria for forgiveness. You know, for instance, criteria one is you need to be aware of your sin. You know, you need to be sorry and you need to be ashamed of it. Now, with the planet in the state it is, how many of us are really sorry, and are we really aware of how much we've damaged Mother Earth? Okay, where does that fit in within our faith values? You know, condition number 2 of forgiveness is you make a solemn covenant and a promise with God that you do not repeat that sin again. Can we do that? Amandeep mentioned consumerism. We keep saying, you know, I think we've become heavily on you know, into our consumerism. We just keep buying. You know, number 3, you ask for forgiveness from the person you have committed sin against. You know, how often do we ask the earth for forgiveness? You know, and I just don't think we see that in our spiritual values. And we really need to have a look at that, and then our actions need to lead from that. So anyway, that's my rant over. Again, moving forward now in terms of what other actions are we planning to take. We're organizing more online events. We're organizing other events. We're focusing on religious acts, because if we do this in the mosque, if the masjid starts doing this, if our imams start leading on this, other people will. We need to focus on humility and modesty. That is the solution to the climate crisis. Just take a seat back, stop taking from the earth. Our founding faith leaders you know, be it Buddha, Prophet Muhammad, Jesus. They were all humble. They were all led simplistic lives. We need to go back to that. So we want to start teaching more about that. We need to make sure what we're also doing now is our imams in the mosque, they're always praying for freedom for those oppressed. They're always praying, you know, for happiness. They're never praying um, for an end to climate change. They're never praying for nature, because that becomes a form of campaigning and advocacy. So we're going to get our imams to start praying about these things communally. We're going to retrain our worshippers how to do ablution without wasting water. You know, we're also working to mobilize for COP26. We don't quite know what that looks like yet, but we're getting there. It's going to be focused heavily on young people. And we're also currently working on the Muslim equivalent of the Laudato Si, known as Al-Mizan. And this is going to be launched by the United Nations Environment Programme and ISESCO later in October. And I think that's going to be quite a big document in the Muslim world. And finally, I just want to talk about collaboration and, you know, how we co-create the future. What's my story? I have to say that my current love story at the moment is my friendship working with the panelists here today, with EcoSeek, with Hindu Climate Action, with Eco Dharma, because over a few years we have worked so closely with each other, and I've enjoyed working with them tremendously. And although we work, you know, on our individual faiths, because that's where we best have influence, the fact is that we have all influenced each other. We talk to each other regularly. We seek advice from each other. We seek comfort from each other. We have the same challenges, and we've capacity built each other. And that's definitely the way forward.
Thank you,
You know,
Cameron. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous. So sorry, I want to hear everything that everybody wants to say, but we have 10 minutes each. So thank you. Brilliant, Cameron. Wonderful, wonderful, inspiring. Look at the comments in the chat box as well, and Amandeep too. And now I'd like to hand over to Davina Chauhan, who's the Youth Outreach Coordinator at Hindu Climate Action. She's a recent graduate of Economics and Politics. And yes, thank you. Thank you, Davina.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Olivia. And thank you, Cameron, and to the other speakers. It was really interesting to hear what other faith groups are doing in the UK, and incredibly inspiring, I must say. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Davina Chauhan, and I'm here to talk about Hindu Climate Action. So, Hindu Climate Action is an organisation that acts as a Hindu response to the ongoing climate crisis, working specifically here in the UK, with the aim to raise awareness about climate change in our community. We want to work with the whole community, which we call our Samaj, and each and every individual to use our power as a Hindu community to have an impact. So according to the 2018 census, there are just under 1 million Hindus in the UK. If we can start conversations in our community about climate change and the pressing actions that need to take, we can inspire our community to go greener and help organisations to reduce their carbon footprint. So I just want to briefly talk about how Hinduism is linked with the environment. So in our Hindu tradition, we have this concept called Sanatan Dharma. And in the Mahabharata, Krishna Bhagavan, who's a god of ours, clearly states that dharma are those actions that benefit all living beings. If we reflect for a minute about how he talks about all living beings, we as Hindus need to expand this idea, not just to our family, but to the whole world. And we really have to think about the compassion that we need to practice our dharma, because it is our dharma that allows all living beings to flourish. It's our dharma that upholds and sustains a peaceful and harmonious society. And, you know, this in contrast is really kind of it really contrasts what's going on currently. So if we think about the Amazon rainforest, it's being destroyed. The ice caps are melting, sea levels are rising, and species are just becoming extinct. And as Hindus, this isn't acceptable, and it's completely the opposite to what our Sanatan Dharma teaches us. And therefore, we as Hindus have a religious duty to take action and to reduce harm to what we're doing with what we call Bumi Mata, which is Mother Earth. So, you know, it's really easy to see God wherever we go, but, you know, a true devotee sees God in every living thing. And, you know, when we take this to a higher level, we need to see the whole world as our temple, and acts of kindness and compassion towards the environment is our mantra. So, kind of reflecting on these principles, I believe that we should view the challenge of mitigating climate change using key values to make changes and adhere to our morals and the way of life, which all add up and equate to a positive difference. So at Hindu Climate Action, we always have this on our mind. So we kind of think that there are three main areas of transformation that we focus on. And these are education, inspiration, and action. So to begin with education, Hindu Climate Action currently hold In Conversation Withs. These are monthly talks via social media streams, which bring on key figures to raise a conversation. This month, we had a conversation with Greenpeace discussing meat, faith, and climate change. And the main aim of this is really just to create a conversation, to get people thinking about certain topics and stimulate that change, and provide viewers with relevant information that they can take away and reflect on. Another key way to educate is by holding workshops, and we do this for numerous groups within our community. So we do talks at mandirs, so temples. We do talks for students at universities. And these workshops cover the climate crisis. They explain why protecting the environment is so important within our tradition, and it gives tips on how to reduce your carbon footprint. Again, we tailor these to our audience, and, you know, we ensure that the Hindu aspect is included. And, you know, it's also more specified to the demographic. I think another good way that we try and educate is through our social media. Social media is a great way to kind of educate, but also display a lot of good materials, and most importantly, collaborate and network with people. It's where we can find like-minded people who share similar interests. And, you know, this is vital again to co-create and transform the climate sphere. So in terms of inspiration and to inspire, I would say that our talks and our kind of social media really do aim to inspire. But in terms of more specific examples, we have one volunteer at the moment who's currently working on a project with a youth group. So what they're doing is they're trying to encourage a youth group to think about how food is produced in very simplistic terms. And I think at such a young age, it's so encouraging to try and allow children to think about these environmentally conscious decisions. And, you know, if you think about it, it's very reassuring, because at the end of the day, the youth are tomorrow's leaders. So they're a really key area that, you know, a really key demographic that is really important to target. Another key area that we focus on is working with the National Hindu Student Forum. So currently we're working on a challenge-based competition with over 50 universities across the UK. And by asking them to complete small, very, very small, sustainable changes, such as, you know, change from a meat diet to making a vegan meal, or use Ecosia, a web browser whose profits go to planting trees instead of Google. You know, we're just instilling these very small and simple, easy changes that students can take forward for the future. A future project, and I think actually something that Amandeep raised as well, is talking about careers. Something that we're looking to do is have podcasts, so to try and engage with students and to really kind of give them advice and tips on how to get within the environmental sphere. And then kind of lastly, action. So our aim is to help people, you know, to be inspired and to make sustainable changes. But, you know, we hope that this action, this inspiration is then changed into action. And I think everything that I've stated above, from the career session to the workshops to social media, has an effect on people and does transform the way people think. You know, some effects will definitely have more of a long-term action, i.e. the career session. You know, if we inspire a couple of students to work within civil engineering to make buildings that are more energy efficient, just think about the benefits that will cause. So I suppose, in summary, we've already seen massive progress within our communities, but there are still challenges. I think the biggest challenge that we're currently facing is, of course, COVID, and it's made it very difficult to connect with a lot of our community, especially those who use technology less. So I think in terms of our future endeavors, this is definitely a bracket of individuals that we are going to be targeting more. So I think, to kind of summarize, and in terms of talking about transformation and co-creating this future, I think there are three main points, which are to educate, inspire, and take action within our community. Thank you.
Wonderful, Davina. Thank you so much, and lovely that to have your youthful spirit. It's fantastic. So thank you, and to all of you speakers, please don't forget to put any questions in the Q&A box. We'll try and answer as many as possible. And I'm now going to hand over to Jamie Cresswell, who's the director of the Centre for Applied Buddhism and very involved in intra-Buddhist and interfaith and multi-faith work. Thank you, Jamie.
Well, thank you very much, Olivia, and thank you to all these great speakers. Isn't this wonderful? What an amazing evening this is turning out to be. It's so amazing to hear passionate people talking about their faith and how they want to put it into action in terms of the climate issue and the climate crisis. So thank you to the speakers so far. Of course, being the last one to speak, it always gives me a problem in that everybody said everything already. So I'll do my best. But over the last couple of years, many things have been happening in terms of action towards the climate crisis. And I would fully understand if many people are not aware of this, because the media are incredibly slow to report these activities. Even the amazing COP26, which is taking place in Glasgow in November, is little known amongst the general public. So it is great that we have various opportunities, and these opportunities are arising to bring information to more people, and then to have them to be more involved in some way in climate action. So through my own involvement in Religions for Peace UK, an opportunity arose almost a year and a half, more than a year and a half ago now, to work together with Faith for the Climate that you've heard quite a bit about already this evening. And I must thank Religions for Peace UK for the great sponsorship which they're continuing to give to this project. So although Faith for the Climate were a relatively new organisation at the time, a lot had already been done and achieved in terms of bringing faith traditions together to take action. So the main work I found myself involved in, although actually these people that you've heard are doing most of the work, is in the development of a capacity building program. And various faith traditions have come together to share and to build best practice tools in climate crisis, to learn about advocacy, learn about activities and actions, and learn about each other. And it's amazing that many people have emerged who are passionate about the issue and were strongly involved in faith traditions. So through those people, this learning that came out of the project could then be taken into their own faith traditions and create all sorts of activities which you've been hearing about tonight, some educational, and this has meant that many more people have had the opportunity to learn and participate and gain knowledge and confidence in taking action of various kinds. So to speak now from a Buddhist perspective, I work with in the Centre for Applied Buddhism, and also I'm involved in the network that came out of this capacity building called Eco-Dharma, the Eco-Dharma Network. So we've been organising various intra-Buddhist gatherings, Buddhists from all different traditions, and people attended from all these traditions. Our first event was a great beginning. It brought together people who were already involved in climate issues, as well as people who wanted to be involved and hadn't really done very much. The second event that took place was even bigger, and I must say a real community and sangha, as we say, started to emerge. So by this time, the Eco-Dharma Network had really been created and had become part of the network of Buddhist organisations, an umbrella organisation of Buddhist groups in the UK. And then lockdown hit. So like everyone, we struggled to work out how to continue. So we started to run online events, webinars with a variety of speakers, discussing all sorts of ways in which people could be involved and take action and think about the climate crisis and share ideas. We discussed Buddhist ideas and how they might be relevant to this emergency. We discussed types of action that were already taking place and things that could be organised in the future. We learned about advocacy and speaking to power, getting out there and speaking to MPs. And we heard from people who have a lot of experience and those who are relatively new. So it's been a fantastic community of passionate and supportive people. And it's also a place where people can share their own concerns, or maybe even their feelings of hopelessness, which I'm sure many of us have felt. I know I have felt this way. But hearing other people's experiences and discussing the issues within this community that's arisen has been really beneficial to me, and I know to many others. Now, of course, we must accept that what we are doing is not easy and it can cause us distress. But there are ways to deal with that, particularly if we are part of a support community. So the Buddhist tradition in which I practice is called the Nichiren tradition of Soka Gakkai International. And a number of us have been involved within Eco-Dharma. And in the middle of 2020, some of us noticed a sort of buzz of interest growing within our Buddhist organisation. And I felt it sort of felt a bit like our passion and involvement was catching. So we got together with others from the organisation and we organised these webinars that you're attending now. These have enabled members of the Soka Gakkai in the UK and anyone else who wants to attend, actually from all around the world now, to learn and to develop their own understanding. And the idea is that these will run right up to November when COP26 takes place in Glasgow. Also, some of you will know about Buddhist Action Month, which has been happening every year for the last 5 years. And this will happen again this year in June. And the topic this year, the title of it is Lions Roar, Speaking Up in a Troubled World. So these are other things that are coming out in the future for involvement and action. But in the meantime, I've been thinking and reading around the climate issue and trying to make sense of it myself from a Buddhist perspective. And what has emerged for me is a realization. Thinking of the COVID pandemic, for example, as a separate event is missing the point. We have an ecological crisis. The pandemic is part of the ecological crisis. So many of the issues which we see around us today, whether it's racial injustice, gender inequality, hatred, division, these are all included and are part of the ecological crisis. This crisis has developed over decades, if not longer. So this term ecology suggests a system, an interactive and interrelated system. I think that idea can be very helpful when we are working and thinking about how to be involved in climate action and how we can make a difference. So Buddhism similarly puts forward a concept of this interaction, and it's known as the web of interdependence. One way of understanding this is through this wonderful story of Indra's net, which I'm sure many of you already know about. But for those who don't, this shows that all phenomena are connected in a great and complex web of overlapping and interacting elements. And this connection is explained in different ways, through different principles, all of which point to the interdependent nature of all phenomena. So the story is the Buddhist deity Indra, who represents the natural forces which protect and nurture life, is in the palace. And above Indra's palace, there's an enormous net. And at every knot where the net crosses, there is tied a brightly coloured mirrored jewel. And this enormous net is shimmering with brilliant colours of jewels tied at every knot. And each jewel contains and reflects the image of all the other jewels in the net. And when a single cord is pulled, each and every jewel throughout the net sparkles beautifully, so no part of the net is unaffected. So this points out that we are all connected. Our relationship with the environment is similarly interconnected to us. We're not only part of this huge ecology, but we are this huge ecology. From this perspective, the relationship of all things in the universe are not something still and static, but rather dynamic and pulsing and creative. This principle explains that one person can positively affect the whole web of interconnected life, and one person can affect a change on a variety of levels in society, across humanity, and in the environment. And this is such a powerful concept. It means that by taking action ourselves, we can make a huge difference to society and the world around us. Even though we may think that these small actions that we're taking are going unnoticed, from this perspective, change does take place. We are all making a difference when we recycle, when we create eco-based communities, when we don't fly, when we don't drive, and so on and so on. And when we talk to others about the crisis and take other actions. So during the pandemic, we've experienced all sorts of hardships and difficulties, and perhaps we've also had changes in the way that we view life and wish to see it in the future. Maybe we are seeing that this extreme individualism, ultranationalism, extreme materialism, greed, and these are some of the issues which we face and which affect the future ecology of life. We may have started more than ever and want to see change, and important changes, to build greater awareness and to see what is problematic in our society. So without some understanding of this idea of interconnectedness at the core of all life, we can experience uncertainty, fear, distress, and this can lead to discrimination and even hatred. So by taking this idea on a step, we can start to consider the relevance and importance of our own inner or individual transformation. I think that many faith traditions have concepts of inner transformation. Certainly it's important for Buddhists. So a short quote from a Japanese Buddhist teacher, Nichiren, and he says, "Environment is like the shadow and life the body. So when the body moves, so does the shadow, as we all know. When we make inner transformations and changes, the environment responds. And likewise, the environment supports the body." Ordinarily, we might see things as two or separate or binary. On a deeper level, all things not only affect each other, but all phenomena are one and whole and life itself. For example, there is no doubt that by attending events with others, by carrying out dialogue and learning from others, I've not only been introduced to much around the ecological crisis and have built my own understanding, but also my own self-assurance has developed. And this has led me to taking new actions, to bringing a different approach to my actions and my discussions. And this inner change is leading change externally through my actions. I am very sure that it is possible that people do have power that can be harnessed rather than falling back into delusion and fear. We can build and develop our own inner resources. So just to finish off, I just want to say that I think you might have picked up that I think that personal inner change is important and reflects in the environment and will make a difference, and that community and working with others is also really important. We don't need to go it alone or struggle alone, but we need to share and work as a strong creative community. So thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So thank you to all the wonderful speakers. And thank you also to all of you. There are lots and lots of questions coming in. Unfortunately, we won't have time to answer them all because we've only got 20 minutes left. But we'll try our best and we'll pass them on to all the speakers and hopefully find a way of communicating some answers to you afterwards. So without further ado, I'm going to combine a couple of questions. So the first one is about vision for the future. So this question is, time is of the essence to make COP26 an effective forum for change. How can religious organizations support the international cooperation and vision that is necessary in order to make sure the COP26 can make an actual difference? And this connects also into what is your vision for the future that leaves nobody behind, the future that we can co-create together. So who would like to go first? Should I ask Kamran?
Thank you, Olivia. Olivia, I'm just gonna, rather than answer the COP question, I want to answer your second question. So I'm gonna quote from Sultan Bahu, and he's a Sufi saint after which the Bahu Trust is named. So he's a 16th century saint. And I'm gonna quote this in Punjabi first, and I'm sure Amandeep will appreciate because she's a Punjabi speaker. So he says, Iman salamat har koi mange, ish salamat koi hu, mange iman sharmau ishko dil nu gairat hoi hu. Jis manzil nu ish pachawe, iman nu khabar na koi, mera ish salamat rakhe bahu, iman diyan dariyan hu. And that translates into everyone asks for firmness in faith, but few firmness in love. They ask for faith and are ashamed of love, such arrogant hearts. Faith has no idea of the place where love transports you. I swear by my faith, Bahu, keep my love firm. And the whole point of that is, for us to move together, we need more love for each other. I mean, everywhere we see, it's just full of aggressiveness. Even everywhere, whether it's TV, social media, politics, and if we understand the concept of love, we'll suddenly find that we'll very quickly find the solutions to our problem.
Fantastic, thank you. Davina, what about you?
Yeah, so thank you, Olivia. So just to kind of answer the question about time is of the essence and how can religious organizations support international cooperation, I think everyone being here today shows how we can support international cooperation. You know, there's multiple faith groups all working together collaboratively. And I think actually it's a good opportunity for COP26 organizers to look at faith groups and say, okay, you know, we're all working together collaboratively, working on the same goal. Why can't, you know, international organizations do that? And I think the big thing about climate change is that it affects everyone. It isn't about borders, you know, it isn't about, oh, this, in a sense, yes, the global south are going to be negatively impacted the fastest, but nonetheless, it is an issue that we all face and we all are going to bear consequence to. And I think this is another really important thing that needs to be highlighted, you know, during COP26.
Brilliant. Beautiful, thank you. Amandeep, do you have anything to add about the vision for the future?
Yeah, the vision for the future has to be collaborative. There's no other way. If you're living in the same town and you're wanting to do a tree planting project, a litter pick, why not get that church down the road? Why not get that group of Buddhist people that you kind of see but you don't really know? And I think the main thing is we need those platforms to find those people. So I know there's kind of interfaith organizational searches you can do, but I found it very difficult personally to find these things. So really, I think it's about knowledge and sharing. We don't share enough information and knowledge. When we start doing that and we start getting the strength in numbers, it just feels like right now I just feel so connected to everyone. I can't see anyone that, you know, that's putting these messages and people who aren't messaging, but because we're all thinking the same thing, it's just really, really kind of goosebumpy.
Wonderful, yeah. It's all relationships as well, isn't it? It's dialogue, relationships, collaboration. Fantastic. Jamie, what about you?
Well, much has been said, but I think, yes, I go back to community. And as you were just saying, relationships, I think that's really, really important. And I think, Amandeep, you're quite right, you know, that building local communities where you live, just going out, going to the local church, going to the local clubs that exist, and talking to people and finding people who are involved and interested. I mean, I live in a village, and I've sort of found out that there is an environment group, and it's amazing once you start to contact them and see what they're doing, how many people who you think actually in this little village that I live in would just be, you know, going behind their front doors and staying away from everybody, how passionate they are about the environment. And so there are people out there that you can contact. And I'm also very hopeful regarding the new incumbent in the White House and the steps that he's now taking to rejoin the climate agreement. And also he made a statement today about the importance of the climate crisis. So let's hope that takes off.
Yes. Things have to change on a systemic level as well as individual lifestyle changes, don't they? So I've got another question here. There's so many great questions, but this one is a little bit different. It says, This was also Holocaust Memorial Week. Climate change is potentially a looming Holocaust for many humans and for other species. We know already it is the most innocent and the most vulnerable who will suffer the most. The planet will survive, future generations may not. What is the key role for people of faith in stepping up to this moral challenge? So who would like to answer to that about the moral challenge and facing the Holocaust squarely?
Shall I go? Yeah, we have, see, I think going back to my rant, which I had earlier, was faith, we've lost touch with nature. See, ultimately, in the whole solar system, the whole system of God, we're nothing. I'm talking as a Muslim here. We're just a very tiny speck. And one day I'll be standing in front of my Lord and I'll be answerable for everything. And I'll have to answer for every creature, for every fauna, flora, everything, the impact I had on it. And I have to reconcile with the fact that I cannot love the creator if I can't love his creation. So it's important. I mean, I think what the question is also referring to is ecocide, which we're doing and we don't even realize it. The more we're consuming, the more Jamie also mentioned the issue, the pandemic we're having is purely, we keep talking about vaccines, but it's the fact that we have this horrible relationship with nature where we keep destroying it, where we're opening ourselves to more diseases and pandemics. So we have to search, this is what I'm saying, we have to search our religious teachings, and because otherwise we're not true to our religion, and we have to be answerable to a higher being at some point. But it is a difficult one to answer.
Yeah, that's challenging for sure. Would anybody else like to come in on that? Amandeep or Jamie? Or Davina?
I think you're going to.
I think Cameron said it really well. If you can't, if you love your creator, you have to love the creation, and that those values of simplicity run through every single faith. And really, they run through the people who are truly of that faith. My parents, I don't know if I should be saying this, but my parents actually got burgled, and the thieves had nothing to steal. There was actually nothing of value that they could take. So my parents are baptized Sikhs. They're very kind of in this simple living, and they're not attached to things, and they're very resourceful. And it made me giggle, because I was like, well, the thieves must be very disappointed, and they won't be coming back to your house. But it just goes back to that, that consumerism that I want, I need, because I see it on social media. I see that person's got this thing, and it's questioning it and saying, well, actually, yeah, like, do we need all this stuff? And questioning prices, this goes beyond, I think, the social injustice and the environmental injustice. It all is very interlinked. Why are we paying cheap prices for these items of clothing that we're getting, and turning a blind eye to the labor, that's going into it? So, and they're doing it because, their environmental conditions mean that they don't have those industries anymore. There's just so much interconnected a story that somehow needs to be fed in.
So that's the story to tell as well, the interconnection of all these seemingly different aspects of our malaise. So I've got another question, which maybe Davina, I don't know yet. Jamie, did you want to? Sorry.
I was just going to add to what's been said, that going on from what I said about interconnectedness, and other people have mentioned it, I think the key is that the way we act affects us. It comes back on us. So you said, Kamran, that we've sort of lost touch with nature. Actually, I think we are nature, and we've forgotten that. And we haven't realized that the actions that we're taking, ultra materialistic and greed and so on, just come back straight in our faces. And I think that's a moral issue that we've got to somehow try and put across. That people understand that action has consequences, and big ones.
Fantastic. So Davina, I'm going to ask you, another question which says, we know that the world needs to eat much less meat, which is overwhelmingly consumed by wealthy people. Our meat addiction is damaging not just climate, but also the rest of the ecosystem. I'd like to hear if each faith tradition could take this issue on.
Yeah, definitely. So from a Hindu perspective, actually, we have this principle and this concept called ahimsa, which actually means to create as least harm and suffering as possible. And I think when we think about diet and the constraints that we put on our planet and our climate, you know, animal products like meat and dairy have huge carbon footprints. And cutting and reducing these from your diet will have enormous environmental benefits. So from a Hindu perspective, we're always applying this ahimsa value. This is why you do find that a lot of Hindus don't eat meat in general, because it's this idea of non-violence, non-violence to yourself, non-violence to the planet, non-violence to animals and all living being things. And actually, I'd like to hear from other faiths as well, if similar principles exist. But definitely from a Hindu perspective, it's something that, you know, we're trying to mention and bring up in conversation within our communities. And that's why at universities we're having these talks about teaching them what ahimsa is and the principles behind it, and simply switching from a meat-based diet to a plant-based diet. And you know, there are also really brilliant documentaries on Netflix, for example, about the benefits. And I think for people who don't want potentially too much information, it's great to just look at these documentaries and learn, because I think that's how, you know, this is this whole part of educate. So yeah, that's the Hindu perspective.
Great. Mandeep, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of double standards. So they'll say within a Gurdwara, you're not allowed to bring in any meat products because, you know, that purely vegetarian, langar and everything. But then you look at kind of the bags that are being carried, the shoes that are being worn, the belts, the leather. And it just makes it makes the mind boggle really as to where do you draw the line, where do you stop? Because then you've got facial creams, you know, that you've put in, and they might be using shark fin or some sort of, you know, really horrible ingredient. But because it's not on your plate like a steak, it feels so much easier to kind of ignore that part. But, you know, looking at the cosmetics industry and palm oil, it's, and I think that's a difficulty out there. People want to do the right thing, but they feel so overwhelmed with information, choices, and limitations, not enough alternatives that are affordable. I think affordability is a big thing. You know, if you're looking at corn compared to meat, sometimes it's just the cost of something is just, you know, prohibitive to your behavioral change. So for me, it's, and this is where EcoSeek UK, I think I want them to do more in terms of advising people, even kind of feminine hygiene products, you know, sanitary towels, nappies, things like that. There are alternatives out there. Maybe they're a bit taboo to talk about within, you know, certain religious settings, but we need to talk about every aspect of our life. It's not plant a tree and then go along and do your regular day-to-day stuff. It's about everything, and it's too big for some people to tackle, so they leave the whole thing alone.
And how can we make that a you know, a positive story rather than just something that you're not allowed to do, yet another thing?
I think it's about the small changes. Everybody has to just take the small steps, and if you take a small step, that will inspire someone else to take that small step, and all of a sudden your one small step has resulted in something big. And it sounds so cliche to talk like this, but when you think about it, it really is the only way. You cannot change your whole life. Anyone that does, I'd love to hear from them. I think they're amazing and wonderful if they can make that many big changes, but for the regular person that I speak to, it's just not practical.
Brilliant. Cameron and Jamie, anything you'd like to add in any way about anything transformation, plant-based diet?
Yes, I mean the meat issue is a big one for me as well. I was vegetarian before I was a Buddhist. Some forms of Buddhism are strictly vegetarian and some are not. And you know, I think we do need to take that on board. The whole palm oil question is a big issue for me, and I suppose for me it is about step by step by step by step, and keeping the steps going. Baby steps, as Cameron said earlier. It is about that. And sometimes it can't be made positive. Sometimes you just have to say, sorry, that's the way it is. But what I'm interested in is the fact that the vegan movement has taken off for whatever reason. And it seems to me that a lot of young people are involved in the vegan movement, you know, and that's encouraging, I feel.
I think you can make it positive because vegan food is delicious. I used to think, oh my God, it's terrible, you know, so boring. But yes, anyway, Kamran, what about you?
No, I think everyone summed everything up really well. There is a huge issue. I'm from Sparkbrook area of Birmingham, which is classed as one of the most deprived areas in the country. If you go down the main high street, the cost of meat and poor quality chicken is a lot cheaper than vegetables.
Yeah.
So there's a huge issue around inequality. So if a single mother with 4 children, she will go to the chicken and chip shop because she's just worried about feeding her child, because the vegetables are really expensive. And now with the various different political issues that are going on, food prices are going up. So it's not, and the other thing is we have to, whilst the meat issue is a big issue, we have to bring back moderation. Sometimes whatever we do, like now McDonald's are into vegan burgers, and you can see them, you know, doing GM modified vegans, all these corporates. So whatever we do, our poison in society is we end up just, whatever good we get, we do too much of it, and it ends up being more problematic for us in the future. And we just need to take a step back and go back to simplicity and modesty.
Wonderful.